Right guys, TacticalRab back again today. I hope you're all doing well and enjoying your day so far. In these last several days there's been quite some discussion regarding the meta as it stands right now here in Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War. The Krig, the 74U, clearly the dominant weapons, but some teams have been using some relatively unorthodox picks, and there's been some serious questions raised as to whether these are actually viable in the state of the game as it stands right now. Intrigued to take your thoughts in the comment section below. Like if you guys enjoyed the video, subscribe if you were new as always, I'd greatly appreciate it. It really helps out the channel. Thank you very much indeed for doing that. This I thought was really interesting from IU Turtle. Overall map win, longest map win streaks so far this season. Overall it goes to Toronto Ultra at 12. Still remarkable about that one. FaZe are just behind them at 11, and then OpTic just after that from their recent performance at the Stage 3 Major. In Hardpoint it's Subliners with 11. In Search it's Search and Destroy. And it's well, Search and Destroy obviously. It's FaZe with 8. And at Control it's 13 Toronto Ultra. So pretty incredible stuff. Thought I'd mention this as well. Thanks to those of you who corrected me of this yesterday. I knew the Dallas Empire made the Huke change after a 3-1 victory against Paris Legion, and then they lost the next series. So I went back to find that, and I put the red line in here, but actually it should have been here where they beat Paris Legion 3-1 at the start of the London home series. That of course changes the picture somewhat, so thanks to those of you who corrected me for that mistake. Thought this was another crazy stat that Round 11 Stats points out right here. This is well, one player in their own ballpark really in terms of first bloods, and well, first blood win percentage first of all, but also how many first bloods they get. I thought there was some crazy, well, I saw some interesting stats really coming out from the FaZe guys. The fact that their stats on the whole for this stage and really for the entire season are so good, like all of those FaZe players, but their first blood percentage in Search and Destroy for Arcitys, for Simp and for Cellium is very, very low, and that's because it's aBeZy who's just out there on his own like a madman getting a ridiculous percentage of first bloods. Like not only does he win over 50% of his first blood engagements, but he's in so many more of them than anyone else in the entire league. So just I mean, this guy is such a different player than really we've ever seen in Call of Duty history, I swear. Like the things he's able to do on the map on a consistent basis still are certainly remarkable. And speaking of aBeZy, this is what he has to say on the 28th of May. Imagine being able to spawn in with a Krig every single day. So the SMG players not necessarily happy with the Krig buff that came in relatively recently, but alongside that Krig buff, there were pretty much all the other ARs got buffed in terms of their bullet velocity or other things. Now the FFAR got a relatively interesting buff where in effect it actually got nerfed in its bullet velocity, I believe, but its damage got increased to the point where, as Parasite's going to say in just a second here, you actually can, well, you can use it to greater effect if you do throw a headshot into the mix. Initially, it got rebuffed back in April. So you guys might remember when the game first came out, the FFAR was the dominant weapon. People were using it in Search and Destroy. JALs all over the place. The FFAR was what people are using. Then it got nerfed pretty significantly. I mean, it was almost in discussion to get GA'd at the time. Then it got nerfed pretty significantly as things tend to happen right to the start of titles, and then it wasn't really used again. Despite Dashy and other players certainly liking to try and use it at times, it's Dashy's weapon of choice really if he had to choose one, but maybe it's not 100% viable. Then though it gets buffed on the 21st of April, and some relatively significant buff came in. Its recall got reduced to some degree, got somewhat better in terms of a few of the attachments, and you guys might remember this series on the 3rd of May when Dashy was using it up against Los Angeles Thieves to great effect on Express Search and Destroy. Now this at the time was okay, thinking what's going to go on with the FFAR here? Are pros going to GA it out of the game? Is it going to get too strong? But now with the Krig buff, it seems like a lot of pros have decided actually the FFAR isn't actually too good by any means, and it's really the Krig that is the dominant force right now. But since then on the 3rd of May, there was actually of course this additional buff that came through just a couple of weeks later, and well, this is what Parasite says as a result of that. One headshot now with the FFAR makes it kill in one less bullet now, oh my god, as he says at the time. So a lot of discussion of the fact that okay, the FFAR might all of a sudden be one of the best weapons in the entire game, and not many players are really taking advantage of it right now, because I think that the general opinion among the pro scene really is that it's not viable. That's what Asim is going to talk about here in just a second, saying that look, if you're not using the FFAR, or if you're not using the Krig, sorry, if you are using the FFAR, if you are using the QBZ, which was used for a time and it's still now being used to some degree, we'll look at that with Assault in just a couple of seconds here. If you're not using, well, the Krig and you're using one of those weapons, if you're an AR player, then you're just completely lost, right? But maybe the statistics don't necessarily back that up, and well, as Dashy says, FFAR is gross now, ha ha ha, absolutely like that, looking for an opportunity to put Dashy back on the thumbnail, you guys know the drill. So okay, Zinc says not too long ago, now the FFAR needs to be GA'd, this meta was good, so clearly some people actually use using it certainly in the challenger side and having good success with it, but maybe it won't quite reach this extent in the professional scene, and it hasn't necessarily done, but still, just a couple of days ago in the FaZe series, Dashy was using it up against Atlanta FaZe. I mean, I think he had some decent success with it in a couple of the early rounds, then he put it away for the Krig on some of the defenses, so it certainly depends on where you're playing on the map as to what weapon you should use, and in most circumstances, the Krig is just going to be the better weapon, all things considered. But in certain situations, for example, inside the train right here around the A-bomb, certainly the FFAR can be a very viable weapon indeed on this map, and of course, we saw in that clip a little bit earlier, Dashy was using it to great effect down near the B-bomb site as well. So all things considered, I think the FFAR can be very good. If you're good at controlling the recoil and you're practiced with it, this gun shoots absolute lasers. I'm sure if you guys tried that at League play or something like that, you'll find that on occasion you can get some very nice gunfight wins, but being consistent with it is the big challenge, but some of these better pros are able to do so. And also very interesting really was Los Angeles Guerrillas versus New York Subliners this past week, because there were some players on the Los Angeles Guerrilla side that were using these kind of unorthodox weapons to pretty good effect, right? They almost won this map, which is pretty impressive up against a team like the Subliners that's just so good at their hardpoints. But yeah, the Subliners guys were not using these kind of unorthodox weapons in a sense. The FFAR came out from Chino, and as you can see right here on the final scoreboard, Chino was going 23 and 19 with the FFAR, so pretty fair play. And on the other side, you had Assault actually using the QBZ, so no Krigs at all on the side of LAG on this Apocalypse map. And to be fair to them, they actually fought New York Subliners relatively close in this series. So I'll share the clip right now for you guys on what Asim has to say on the matter. If you're not using the Krig, you're pretty much lost, but at the same time, maybe the statistics don't necessarily back that up, with players like Dashy and players like Chino, for example, with the FFAR having good success of late, and maybe that will continue to proliferate among the other pro players in the scene.
They had a FAR on the map, they had a QBZ, they had all types.
No, I was very confused. I started dying to that thing. I was like,
they were playing weapon draft. Someone said they were playing weapon draft from IW.
Yeah, I mean,
Chris, we were really confused. Like, dude, I was seeing FARs, and then I saw a late QBZ, and I only saw a Krig sometimes.
Weird.
I was like, what are these guys doing?
I mean,
the FAR I understand, because Dashy tried that for a bit. Yeah, I mean the fire rate on it, like I kind of.
But the it's just so good, though.
I think
the QBZ is the weird one to me, though.
No,
QBZ is the weird one.
Ben, before the recent patch where they literally buffed the Krig again with the bullet velocity, it's like no debate. If you're using anything else, you're simply lost.
Chino was kind of frying that map with the FAR, though. Yeah,
he was doing his thing.
I don't care how good he's. I don't care how he's doing. How good he's doing. That weapon, it's unmatched like the Krig. That's all I gotta say.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Chino's a beast. I'm telling you right now, the FAR is so good now. I mean, this is just another topic, but the reason why it's good is because one headshot, that's all it takes now, right? It's not like the Krig where you need two. Yeah. One headshot and it lowers the time to kill, like by one. And then by one bullet. And that makes this thing kill absurd. It kills faster than the M4, like with a single headshot. So if you can get that one headshot in a lot of your fights, it's gonna kill pretty quickly. It's also very forgiving because you spray. So it's not a bad gun.
As Jacob says right here, back on the 16th of May, how did Insight just win that on Simp? There were some crazy gunfights going down back then. And as Asim says, Bell Fiber, Krig 60 Hz, and the headset multiplier, headshot multiplier. He actually does mean high cal is something serious, says Gunless. So yeah, the Krig on the 60 Hz server, that is more clearly the dominant weapon, I suppose, in the game right now. But the 74U also incredibly good. I think most players would say the Krig is the best gun. But in certain situations, the QBZ was used for a time, and I was kind of surprised that it was really when the whole XM4 GA came into effect, and then the QBZ came out. But still, some players, like Assault, for example, seem to relatively still like it. But I think that most players would probably argue that the Krig, just use the Krig and you can't really go too far wrong. But in niche situations, the FFAR could be more viable. I do like to see some variation in the weapon metas, certainly. And Clayster, of course, the captain of Subliners, has always been a player that's liked to do that type of stuff. So I do wonder that if players continue to use it behind the scenes in scrims and stuff, whether New York will consider employing that as part of their arsenal. But I think most of the pro players are relatively happy with the two-weapon meta. I think us as fans enjoyed to see some new things get pulled out, especially, for example, this FFAR. When it is used to great effect, it's pretty cool to see at the same time. But of course, the Krig is way more consistent in the long run. Talking of that XM4 GA, I thought these are some kind of crazy stats, especially with regard to the whole Simp and Hydra discussion, right? Because before Hydra came over to the States, it was like, okay, this guy is the French Simp. And I thought it was kind of remarkable, the fact that in terms of overall KD, since the XM4 GA, Simp and Hydra have exactly exactly the same overall KD at a 1.13. And just look at the FaZe guys right here. So this is Simp the XM4GA, I mean, a couple of months ago now. Cell has a 1.14, Simp has a 1.13, Arcitys has a 1.10, aBeZy has a 1.10, right? All these four guys on FaZe are above a 1.1. I mean, these stats courtesy of GG Breaking Point. The link will be down below if you guys would like to check that out. But yeah, these are the top 10 since then. So Standy, Octane, Dashy with a 1.09. So, you know, really for all the discussion, the fact that Dashy since the XM4GA hasn't been so strong, statistically doesn't necessarily bear that out. But during those weeks where OpTic were having a difficult time, it was really Dashy's statistics in terms of kills per round and kills per 10 minutes that were kind of suffering, not necessarily the KD side of things. Sky's also with a 1.10, and that's pretty interesting to see that he's turning up over there. And then Insight also on Toronto Ultra has well done some phenomenal things. Of course, there's many more stats here than just KD. I mean, look at S&D First Bloods, for example. I mean, this is the stat we were looking at earlier in the video with aBeZy setting her at 19.3 First Blood percentage. Absolutely remarkable stuff. I think on the season it may even be slightly higher than that. So just ridiculous stuff. And that, of course, contributing to the point standings we see in the league right now. Just, well, we did talk about it on the Breaking Point podcast when we recorded last night. That will be going live in just a few hours' time if you guys would like to check that out. I mean, myself, Lyman back in business, EasyMac as well. I mean, Lyman was pointing out the fact that almost, very much almost, Seattle Surge and the Paris Legion have nearly won less maps in the entire season, that being maps, than Atlanta FaZe have won series, right? So Atlanta FaZe have won 24 series, Legion have won 27 maps, and Surge 28 maps. So maybe FaZe could even overhaul them somehow if they continue to have a tough time these last several weeks. But well, it really does seem to me now, just looking at these standings, that well, Rokkr and Mutineers are really pulling away from the rest of the pack here. And despite LAG pulling out these weapons as we discussed, doesn't really seem to be making too much difference for them. Is a 50-point gap now between Mutineers and the rest. So seems like these guys, if anything, are pretty much doomed to their fate to not make the World Championship right now. But well, still they have a lot to play for. There's a lot of prize money to play for. They can still make it. They're not out of the woods by any means. The teams that are slightly above them. And these are the matches coming up for this week. Of course, we'll talk about the schedule in more detail in a couple of days' time. But wanted to pick up some key ones because I think Empire versus LAG is going to be very interesting. Of course, we talked about Empire and their struggles in the video last night. LAG are not going to be an easy team to get past. I think Subliners versus Mutineers is going to be very interesting because Florida, of course, just beat Toronto Ultra a couple of days ago in that crazy game 5. So if they can beat Subliners or at least be competitive here, we could have a new potential championship contender on our hands in Ultra, in Mutineers, sorry, if they can keep things going. And then, of course, Clayster versus Crimsix is always exciting, and the Sunday matches in general are pretty interesting to keep your eyes on. OpTic, of course, play once against the Paris Legion next week as well. But intriguing your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did enjoy it, I'd greatly appreciate a like on the video. It really helps out the YouTube algorithm that you enjoyed this content. Other people like you may enjoy this content as well, and I've grown the competitive Call of Duty community. Thank you very much, as always. Take care, and I will see you next time.